Hey up, I'm Nathan Human, and this is episode 15 of The Biscuit Reviews. It is just about 10 years since I first did a couple of podcast series with my friend James Diamond. And since we both recently massively enjoyed the work of one British screenwriter, we thought we would get together for a bit of a 10-year anniversary catch-up. In the spirit of those original shows which we recorded in the pub, we went to a new favourite haunt in Leicester to discuss the work of Joe Barton, whose latest series, Black Doves, was released just after our conversation before Christmas. After a bit of reminiscing about those early recordings and getting a bit nostalgic for nights in the pub with the microphones...
This is giving kind of flashbacks of a pub doing a podcast.
Yeah, in a weird kind of out-of-body experience, but also yet massive.
Well, the first one was very busy. Do you remember the first
We got down to discussing screenwriter Joe Barton's distinctive filmography. And yes, as this was genuinely recorded in the pub, you get the bonus of hearing whatever tunes the bar staff have queued up to play. Our focus to begin with was on the Lazarus Project. We do pretty much avoid spoilers, but a quick synopsis is this. A young man called George wakes up on the 1st of July realising he has already lived this particular 1st of July and has in fact leapt back 6 months in time. When this happens again and again, he discovers he has a rare genetic mutation that means he is aware of time being reset. He finds this out when he is approached by someone from the Lazarus Project, a secret organisation that seeks to fix global catastrophes by resetting time back to the last 1st of July. Kind of like going back to the save point in a game.
I think I messaged you. I think I was watching the Lazarus Project. I went, Nathan, this seems like it's right up your street. And then you were like, it very much is, I've already watched it all.
Yeah, and then I think we had a very quick... So this is essentially part of a Joe Barton appreciation episode of the Biscuit Reviews because, you know what, I don't think since we started talking about everything we loved in pop culture and films, Alan Sorkin came up a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Joe Barton would have been one of the people we'd have talked about of like, oh my God, I just love the way he writes.
100%.
I can't think of anyone else recently where
both
style...
of us have gone, no, that style is uniquely them.
Yeah.
I can tell it's them when I watch it.
You know what, I think it's the first British person I'm thinking of. I know it's different because he's a writer and this person was a director, but since like Edgar Wright,
yes,
where I go, I can now spot Joe Barton's stuff from his writing of, oh, I kind of get this.
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
yeah.
So you were on the Lazarus. Have you now finished the Lazarus Project?
So I've watched all of the Lazarus Project.
And can we now cry that there's not a third
and
series?
And I'm absolutely distraught at the fact there's no more Lazarus Project because it ended in a way that made me go, oh, this could be really interesting.
I don't get in the streaming age why they're not doing another one. I don't. Surely someone should pick it up. There's clearly an audience when you look on Twitter and online. Lots of people were talking about it.
Loads of people were. I think my worry is actually the streaming age is regressing back to the broadcast age. So for all these streamers that made their kind of made the difference and here you go, here's a whole series at once and things like that. I'm now like having to watch things week by week again and
with adverts.
I'm being forced to watch adverts. I'm having to watch them week by week, and it's a bit like how Amazon have destroyed the high street, and then we're kind of left in this situation where the streamers have won, but are we really happy that they've won?
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's an element of they're now having to justify. They're having to make business decisions now, which I think they didn't have to.
But it's an interesting one. This was Sky, and clearly Sky were getting viewers. I don't know the final figures on it. I'll have to look into it of finding it for the Lazarus Project. But it certainly seemed to pick up a lot of noise online of people talking about it. And sci-fi, particularly, if you look at like Apple. It's been their way in of knowing
having a bit of a renaissance as well at the minute. Yeah,
sci-fi's
interesting
massive,
thinking sci-fi.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful maybe someone somewhere will pick it up.
I can only assume it just isn't cheap to make.
Yeah. But there's something, so I'm really curious of what you liked about Joe Barton. So have you now caught up with, you've watched The Devil and the Bastard Son?
Yes.
Yeah, look, I don't know why, but I always get the title muddled. It is actually The Bastard Son and the Devil himself. Yeah, that's the full title.
Wow, and you just started Giri, Haji.
Just starting that other minute as well, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to throw to you of what made you want to watch another one of Joe Barton's after the first?
So what I loved about the Lazarus Project is that it didn't need to be this big high concept sci-fi show. It was about people and decisions that you make and the regret you might have for those decisions and how we as humans relate to it. It was funny. It's whip smart. There's funny characters, and you mentioned Sorkin just now, in that sense that characters don't talk in the way that they would do in that. If that situation was real, they wouldn't goof off and make jokes and reference Jurassic Park or Back to the Future and things like that. They wouldn't. They would take the job of saving the world a lot more seriously.
But I kind of think you'd think some of it.
But
like that Back to the Future reference you talk about is something where, like, if I watch the film, that's the type of thing
someone to do that.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it comes to that idea. I remember once seeing this bit of a sidestep, but I remember seeing a documentary about film sound, a really fascinating documentary about film sound, and particularly about Top Gun. So the sounds they use for Top Gun. So when they filmed Top Gun, the sound recordists used the sounds of real fighter jets, and then at a test screening, they sounded wimpy. They were the real sounds of fighter jets, but they're not what we wanted to believe that fighter jets sounded like. So they mixed in animal noises like lions' roars, baboons, went backwards and things like that to create these noises that weren't realistic, but were our idealised versions of what those sounds would be. And I think for me, that's what I'd want people to react in that way when they were doing that. And it reminds me of Sorkin in that way, in terms of people in the corridors of power don't talk like they do in the West Wing, but we want them to.
Yeah, and I think it gets to the human heart of it. I think it's really interesting to say about the sound, because I've heard that before, and when I've been recording sound, like wind's a great example. You record wind, so you go outside, I've taken the microphone, you get wind, you're like, oh, it doesn't sound very windy. It can't be. I'm literally recording wind. It doesn't sound like the wind.
You can never take a good photo of fire. For example, it never looks the same as it does to your eye. So it's kind of this idealised version of it.
Yeah, you want a heightened one. But I think what Joe Barton does, I might be slightly into you. I think he does this wonderful thing of maybe what you're thinking you'd say.
Yeah.
Of like Sorkin is the idealised version. What's the best thing to say in that situation? Yeah. I think Joe Barton's at once, if you had no filter and you just said, like, he has characters that do what I think are impulsively right.
Yeah.
Where sometimes you watch a horror film or sci-fi going, well, no one would do that.
Yeah.
And they make a decision to fit the narrative. Whereas I think Joe Barton's a genius at finding, I'm going to make my characters do this, then they'll have to fix it.
Yeah.
They'll have to follow this through. So the character in the Lazarus Project, without spoiling for some people, he makes some decisions which totally things up, like massively, and then he has to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I really like that internal logic of, they must be quite, I don't know whether Joe Barton's brave as a writer or just true to himself of, right, they're going to do this, then we have to fix it.
Yeah.
I think it's really rewarding as a viewer. That's what I like about his shows. It's so rewarding to watch the solution to problems you don't often get in shows.
Yeah, absolutely. He's quite happy for his characters to really mess up. And then say, right, well, and actually have characters within the story call people out on the absolute stupid things they've done, in the way that we would want people to.
Yeah, to go, why did you do that?
Why on earth have you done that? Right, well, now you're going to fix it. Now I think less of you. I like seeing those characters, seeing those kind of relationships and those dynamics. And I just remember what really, really caught me the first time. I remember my partner came home, and she had just asked what I'd been watching. I started to explain it, but there's one specific episode which is about the Lazarus Project is about like time being replayed and things like that. And this huge high concept sci-fi, but all I could talk about was the fact how it was impacting on the impending birth of a child to a particular character, and it's this really small human drama being played out while the world is ending. And all I could think about, and the only way all I wanted to talk about to my partner was that human drama, not the plots and the explosions and the gunfights and stuff like that. It was that human drama and how it made me feel. And that's when I went, oh, I really like this writer.
You know what? As always, James, you've nailed it. And I think that episode would be the reason to watch it. It's heartbreaking, it's intense, it's exciting, it's terrifying, it's everything that's human. And he puts his characters through it. And I really like that he keeps pushing it, that it kind of happens. And part of you goes, oh, this isn't going to keep it's going to keep happening. He's going to... It's a really, and I mean, hopefully when you get to Giri Haji, you'll see this is, I think, a real motif of his writing, his work, that I honestly think he should write theatre. This is the type of thing I think on stage, and the actors seem to really pick up on this rawness of writing. I'm going to have to look it up, and hopefully you'll hear my voice saying the correct actor's name over the top, but it's a guy that was in
Tom Burke. That is the name I am floundering to remember. Who also plays Cormoran Strike in the TV show Strike.
It's phenomenal acting performance. But then you see the same again in The Devil and the Bastard Son, of phenomenal acting. And part of me goes, when you hear these actors on interviews, you go, I'm only as good as my script. A bit like the managers and players when they talk about, I'm only as good as...
Yeah.
And you know what? At some point, that's got to be right. That this is down to the writing.
Yeah, 100%.
That it isn't just, there's a director and a producer here, but the writing. So this is a bit of a love letter to Joe Barton of just giving what he wants. And he's got some really interesting ones coming up with, and now he's got Keira Knightley and everyone involved in a new project.
Yeah, a kind of Netflix spy show, which... again, I will watch purely because it's been written by Joe Barton. You know, that is he's now a writer that I'm like, okay, I just need to see what he does next. And I'll be honest, there's not that many pure writers that I'll follow. I think James Graham's one that who I adore.
Sherwood.
So from that world of theatre, did the Dear England recently, This House and stuff like that. A really brilliant. Brilliant voice in theatre. But yeah, Joe Barton is one of those that I kind of recognise his work and I want to see what he does next, 100%.
You might be listening and thinking, well, that's great, but it seems like a sci-fi show and I don't like sci-fi. However, I can't stress enough how a Joe Barton show is less about the genre and far more about the choices people make when put in extreme situations as a vehicle for exploring what makes us who we are.
I honestly can't talk about it enough of how good the writing is. And how enjoyable watching these characters fix problems that he gives them.
Absolutely, and you go from something like the Lazarus Project, very high concept, science fiction, from the mind of Joe Barton, but also in seeing how he's adapted a young adult novel, Half-Blood, into the Devil himself and the Bastard Son, if I've got that right.
Yeah, James, you did get that right. Show off. I won't be inviting you back on.
Which, again, takes it a completely different place. It's a very, very different world. It's a modern day fantasy fairy tale, essentially. Imagine that witches exist in our world, but there is very much a defining line between blood witches and the fairborn witches, I believe, which I think in the books are kind of very much black and white witches. But again, as looked at that and gone, well, yeah, we probably can't call the bad guys the black witches. That's problematic. But it looks at details of like immigration, a society just basically putting up walls, not wanting to know the other people.
And also really defined by your genes of are you
absolutely,
this or not?
Are you this or not? And essentially you've got a blood witch who is the son of the most notorious, potentially murderous blood witch that there is, and he's growing up in a fairborn country and no one trusts him.
Elements of Romeo and Juliet in the story for
100%.
Elements of if kids or people have been fans of Twilight, it's got little bits of that in. I don't mean that in a negative way either.
No.
You might enjoy.
What I love is his world building as well. Like it follows its own internal logic, but not in a cold way. It's alive with small little characters, small little bits here and there that make you go, this is a real live breathing world. And to kind of, again, come up with these essentially just a really personal story about a son who's having to face up to the apparent evil that his father is, but also being another himself and his own feelings of, just teenage kind of like embarrassment, lust, like he writes brilliantly in that for teenagers as well, and that's what I was really impressed by. Again, watching that, I believed these teenagers. It didn't feel like an adult writing for teenagers. It felt like they were characters speaking their own truths, but in a world where witches and fairies and things like that live.
The Half-Bastard Son and the Devil himself carried on the trend of Joe Barton shows getting cancelled without the chance of an extra season to finish the stories off. Although Giri Haji did at least get to deliver one of the greatest TV endings of all time for its one series. I'll let James return to the theme of why you shouldn't let genre put you off getting into Joe Barton's work.
Making a decision on something just because of its genre is foolish, because this isn't just another fantasy show. It's a really clever show. And actually, one thing it reminded me of in some ways was The Boys on Amazon Prime. So you know, again, both very different worlds, but it looks at essentially it's talking about power, how power can corrupt, and are you destined to be what you're meant to be? And in the same way that Boys explores those in very, very different, more violent and incredibly rude ways, which is fantastic. But yeah, I think this does the same. But also, if you like The Boys, this has also got people with loads of really weird and wonderful powers as well that you weren't expecting. So for me, it's a nice little dovetailing show for you to watch. If you enjoyed The Boys, this is like Romeo and Juliet meets The Boys.
You might now be thinking, but Nathan, why didn't you do an episode about Black Doves? That's probably his biggest show. It had Ben Whishaw and Keira Knightley, and it's the most recent. To which I would say, yeah, you make a very good point, and that is one of the very many reasons why I do this podcast to quite likely a handful of people and not in a national publication. But here's the thing, I really, really wanted to like Black Doves, but I would rather chat about the shows I'm most passionate about. Which isn't to say that Black Doves is bad or that you wouldn't like it, just it wasn't my favourite show of his. Anyway, you can let me know why I'm wrong and tell me your thoughts on his other shows. So here are mine and James's biscuit ratings. James went for the Lazarus Project and gave it an M&S milk chocolate coated custard cream rating. Simple everyday themes of regret and loss covered in delicious sci-fi action, finished too soon and left wanting more. Mine was for Giri Haji, which I awarded a coconut macaroon. Familiar in theory, but with a sense of the exotic and a flamboyant finish.
We'll do this in a time-honoured way. Thank you very much. I've been Nathan Human.
And I've been James Diamond.
And yes, that is all for now. Next episode, I'm going back to the end of the world for two epic tales of how humanity might survive and the role technology could play in saving us, as I look at Wanderers by Chuck Wendig and The Ferryman by Justin Cronin. And a reminder, you can catch up on past episodes and subscribe to the free newsletter so you don't miss an episode and get all the updates at thebiscuitreviews.co.uk. Thanks for listening. I'm off for a brew and a bicky. Till next time, ta-ra.